Scripture reading this morning that it's kind of harsh. It's kind of hard. We'll get back to it in a little bit, but hear the words first from Jeremiah chapter 8. My joy is gone, grief is upon me. My heart breaks for what I see and hear. Listen, the cry of my people to you is painful. Is the Lord not in Zion? Does the Lord no longer care? The harvest is past. Your people chose not to repent and change their ways, and they were not saved. And because our people are being ripped apart, I too am ripped apart. I mourn, and dismay has taken hold of me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why is there no healing for my people's wounds? That's hard to hear. It's even more difficult to realize what was going on, why these words came from Jeremiah. And like I said, we'll get back to that in a little while. But I want to start out with maybe a different direction. This last week on the radio, I heard an interview with Ken Burns. Many of you know who Ken Burns is, the wonderful film documentary person, producer, author for over 50 years. And he has touched on so much of American life. Being very honest, just presenting the stories, the good and the bad, and taking a look and letting the stories tell the stories of who we are, a lot of times as Americans, what we believe in, our traditions, what's important to us, where we have fallen short. He was asked in the interview, what is your takeaway? What is it that you really have learned over these many documentaries and these many years? And his statement was very short and precise. He simply said, there is no them, only us. There is no them, only us. He went ahead and explained that he understands complexity of life. He understands the diversity and individualism, and he understands what it takes to have life. But he's also concerned that somewhere along the line, and we've done this for a long time, there's always been that them. If we can blame them, then we can fix things. If we can identify them that don't fit in. But he said, there's no them. There's only us. Us, all of us. That's not an exclusivity kind of mood. It's an inclusive, all of us. Well, the week before last, I had a chance to experience how that looked. Nancy and I and Catherine, our daughter, went into Fort Worth, Texas for Nancy's sister's Meredith funeral, memorial service. Nancy and Catherine went in on Monday. I went in on Wednesday. It was a hard week. And it was supposed to be a hard week. Because even as much as they had done, Nancy and Catherine, in preparing all of us, and did so much, still when that moment comes, that loss hits. It was a hard week. But it was also a very uplifting week because I realized and I acknowledged and I witnessed bridges, not walls, being built. There were walls. In any family these days, it seems like there's always walls that's been built. But at that time, when we all gathered, friends and family, we were us. There was no them. It was just us. Stories were shared, love was given, compassion was felt, that we understood this is what this moment is about. There was no them. There was only us. The day after the memorial service on Friday, I received an email. Some of you are familiar with the artist, the poet, the singer, Carrie Newcomer. I have introduced her a couple times in different songs and different writings. From time to time, she sends out an email with her poetry or her songs. She sent out a poem. And I read through it and realized she knows us. She knows our church. She knows what we do at the Lord's table. I actually put a little copy of this poem if you want to follow along. I'm going to read it. It's a little bit long, but it's worth it to me it is. This is a poem she just wrote. In the season of tissues. My mother believed, well, she believed a lot of things. Like pocketbooks and shoes should match. Lettuce must be worn and not cut. And Richard Nixon was a crook. But she also believed that everything, from colds to flu, to upset stomachs, to a broken heart, could be mended, if not outright cured, with soda crackers and warm ginger ale. Toss in a couple of red and white cans of Campbell's chicken noodle soup, and there you'd have it. An entire professional pharmacopoeia in a brown paper bag. The cool hand on my forehead, the smell of VapoRub on my chest, the way she'd check in regularly, or let me wrap up in a blanket on the couch and watch her favorite soap opera as she ironed shirts in pillowcases. That is why I always have soda crackers and cans of soup in my pantry. You never know when the most simple gesture will be just what the doctor ordered. When a bit of flour and water and a little something sweet might help bring down a fever or lighten a burden. I think this is why my daughter, who is now a grown woman living in a busy urban center, will still call me when she's meepy, which is the word we use to describe feeling a little fluish and vulnerable. And I'll call her honey and poor baby and ask if her husband can stop on his way home for soda crackers and ginger ale. Maybe some soft tissues, the ones with aloe in them. And she always says, "Thanks, Mom." And I always think, "Thanks, Mom." And the whole world feels more tender, more caring, more worthy of saving, because love continues to hold steady in large and small ways, resonating for generations or lightening our days right here and right now in the season of tissues. It's just words. And yet over the years, this poet, this singer, this Quaker woman, deep, deep in her faith, and shares it willingly, lovingly. I had just found freakishly, in a good way, that whenever I have a hole in my soul, she knows how to fill it with her words. As a poet, she just understands that we often have these feelings that we can't put into words, but she somehow does. and it always touches me. I did think about, how did she know what we do at communion? How does she understand about these soda crackers and ginger ale, our loaf and our cup? When we gather around this table, when we take that moment to lift our burdens, that we take this moment just to feel the healing. How did she know that? Well, it started me thinking, and I hope you don't mind me sharing some personal stories, but I'm going to, about how my experiences at the communion table have enlightened me, healed me. I remember the one time in another church down in Mississippi, actually, and in disciples' churches, the Christian church Disciples of Christ, quite often clergy do not come to the table at communion. It's led by the elders and the deacons, the people of the church. They really believe in this thing called priesthood of all believers. And so Carol Montgomery, she was a pharmacist. She had kind of a loud voice, but oh, what she said was always so pure, so meaningful. It was her turn to give the meditation at the table. It happened that DeLynn was there that Sunday. We had a vibrant youth group. A number of the kids who came to our youth group did not belong to our church. They belonged to other church families, typically, or none at all. But they had learned to get to know our kids, and they just thought like we were doing something meaningful, and DeLynn was one of those kids. On Sunday morning, they'd sit together. Now, most of these kids would not come if they weren't a part of our church officially. They'd go with their own families. But in Sunday afternoon, they'd show up for youth group. But this Sunday morning, DeLynn was there, sitting with the other youth. She was a ninth grader, sharp. And she was sitting there, and I just happened to catch in the corner of my eye that when Carol Montgomery went up to the table and started speaking, I could tell that DeLynn kind of moved closer, leaned forward a little bit. Something was going on. I couldn't catch her right after worship that day, but in youth group that afternoon I asked, DeLynn, tell me, was something happening in worship this morning? Did something catch your interest? And she just said, I never knew. I never knew a woman could be a leader in a church. She was part of the Southern Baptist family. Women could teach, maybe. They could serve, but not lead in worship. I never knew women could lead in a church. There was another church that one day the communion table was up on the stage area. And so the deacons, especially once they received the elements, the cup and the loaf, they would come down the stairs. I think I've shared this story with somebody once, that on the way down the stairs, the deacon just tipped the plate just a little bit too much, and the loaf just rolled off so very gently, hit the stairs, perfectly bounced then onto the floor. What do you do? You know, we sometimes talk about how these elements are sacred. We know they're just elements. But sometimes we think of how sacred and holy they are. It's not these elements. Because this deacon just reached down, picked it up, put it back on the platter, and just kept going. He invoked the 3-second rule, which of course is mythical, but that didn't matter. Put it back on the plate and just served it, and back and forth that loaf went. It's these hands that are sacred, isn't it, when we come to the table? Remember that, can I use the phrase the good old days? When we used to sit together, and when it was time to serve communion, we would share it with each other. Your neighbor would receive it from somebody, be served by somebody, then they would turn to their neighbor and serve that neighbor. Remember that? From hand to hand, from heart to heart. That rolling roll on the floor made me remember that these hands are what's sacred. That's why we gather here. Because it is a sacred moment, not because these elements, not because of this, but because the hands that bring it and share it, the hearts that share it. There's no them. There's only us. About 4 years ago, right here, we had come back recently from a trip to Fort Worth, Texas, just go see family. No agenda, no emergencies, just to go down there. Nancy and I, and Catherine and Joe, and Madison, our granddaughter. Went down there, and we were in the north part of town. That's Cowtown. You know, Fort Worth was known as Cowtown. That's where the cattle came in and then would be shipped out. But in the north part of town, the Cowtown heritage remained strong. Usually once a day, they would run the cattle that were still in the pens up down the street just to let people see these cows really do exist. But they had some great restaurants down there. Some real good barbecue, some real good Mexican food. We were down there enjoying the sights and letting especially Joe, our son-in-law, and Madison experience this heritage. Some good, some bad, but it's a heritage. They went into a store. And in the store, Mama Catherine, I think, decided there on the spot that Madison, granddaughter, needed some boots. Some real cowgirl boots. Not these playthings, but real cowgirl boots. And there's plenty of places you can get it down there. There was a store. She turned Madison loose to look. There it was, a pair of red cowboy boots. They fitted her, put the boots on. I guess for about 3 or 4 months, you could not get those boots off of her. That was her absolute choice of foot apparel. So one Sunday when we were down here, and I've got a picture of it, and I was serving at the table. She and Grandma, Nana, and Catherine, Mama, were sitting on the front row. I stood up, I was here, and Madison just hopped down from her chair and just came right over. I knew what that meant, so I picked her up. And she helped me at the table that day, red boots and all. And you know, there was this sense of, isn't that what this table is about? That children, strangers, visitors, guests, us, all are welcomed at that table, red boots and all. And it confirmed to me that there is no them, only us. And that's what this table means. That's what it is. But you see, the journey doesn't stop here. Remember the quote from Jeremiah? He's talking about the pain and the anguish. You understand that according to the timeline, the destruction hasn't quite happened, but it's there. It's there. And the people are in pain and anguish, and so is Jeremiah. So he asks this question, and he talks about, where is the balm of Gilead? You remember that? We have a hymn about that. And the balm was like a perfume or an ointment that had supposedly great medicinal value. And so he's asking, why can't we apply that? Why? But then he answers his own question. He basically, why is there no healing for my people's wounds? He knew that that ointment would not be enough. Well, this is not enough either, because it's where we start. Remember the last part of Carrie Newcomer's poem? And the whole world feels more tender, more caring, more worthy of saving, because love continues to hold steady in large and small ways, right here and right now. Why are we here? Who are we? As not just people of faith, but as United Christian Church. Is it for us to be that beacon? Is that for us to proclaim that love, small and large, is offered here? Right here and now, or there and then. But that love that starts here, where we're reminded of what it means that there is no them, only us. And so we take that to heart, and we understand that out there in the world where we might be tempted to think of thems, we're told we need to, because them are the ones that are causing all the problems, right? But if we can experience what it means to be us at this table, can we not also understand what it means that our world is filled with us? And that's who and what we are called to be. That is why we are here. Because love continues to hold steady. Did you catch that? Not hit or miss, not situational. Because love continues to hold steady in large and small ways, right here and right now. Because there is no them, there's only us. And that's why we are here. Amen. We have this hymn that we're about to sing. I don't know why I picked this hymn. I cannot make it through this hymn. It brings up the memory in a general assembly about 20 years or so, 30 years ago, where 6,000 of us disciples gathered. I want to say it was St. Louis. Might not be. And this was the first time I'd heard this hymn, and it hit me. Even though I don't think the words are in there that there is no them, only us, that's what this means. Let us sing this hymn. In remembrance of me, number 403, as we prepare to come to this, the Lord's table.